So how do you teach effectively, successfully, with students who are so different than you were when you were in school? Let's take a look. Hi, I'm James Callahan, and this is The Do-Over Show, and I have over 20 years of experience teaching in higher education. I have a PhD, public and private university experience, small and large classroom settings, required and specialized courses for majors, and I've taught in 5 different disciplines over that time. Now, here's a scary story I'll share with you. I have a friend who was taking a STEM class in college, and in the syllabus it said there's a required textbook and there were assigned readings from the textbook assigned to each class. But as they went along, this student noticed that not once did the professor actually refer to the textbook in class presentations or discussions. Not once. And as they were walking just before the midterm, as they were walking to class, the professor was walking, and so he struck up a conversation, asked some questions, took advantage of the opportunity of walking to class with the prof, and then just dropped this curious little question to him and said, we have a required textbook, and I've been doing the assigned readings, but we never talk about it in class. The professor stopped and looked at him and said, it's a good thing too, because the midterm and the final are exclusively from the required reading in the textbook. Now, if that kind of story scares you, congratulations. It's not going to scare most students. It's just going to piss them off and say, why didn't he say so? Here's what's needed today. Not the, I told you once, that should be enough approach, but rather, I'm going to have to tell you in ways that you get, that the student gets, in order for this to work for everybody. So let's talk about that question. The question everybody asks, is it going to be on the test? Now, there are some of us who think that everything we say is of equal importance, but we fail to understand the logic of that, and that is that if everything is important, then nothing is really important. I actually had a student, really serious student, at the beginning of a class one time, as I was introducing myself, trying to show them that I was a human being. I had children. I even recited my children's names. A student stopped me and said, excuse me, Dr. Callahan, can you please repeat your children's names? Why would I need to repeat my children's names? They said they took a class last semester with somebody else, and this professor included their children's names as an extra credit question on the final exam, just to see if they were listening, paying attention. Oh my gosh. So what do we do when someone asks the obvious question, will this be on the test? Well, instead of being insulted, instead of ignoring it, I use it as a tool. And I say, well, let's figure out how would something about this, how would it be put as a question? How would it appear on an exam? What kind of things would you need to know to answer this kind of question? And we use it as an exercise in class as part of the teaching experience and the process of learning to say, okay, how am I going to be able to use this information? How will it appear on the test? How will it appear in my life? This gives students a glimpse into the process, not just of evaluating and of just the teacher-student experience, but of how they can learn to process knowledge, how they can hear something and immediately begin to think, okay, what could I be asked about this? And how can I show somebody that I've actually learned a new idea, a new concept, or a new set of ideas? How do I put them together? Now, I teach in the humanities or liberal arts fields, and that means I have more flexibility than the rote memorization courses where people have pop quizzes that look at you and say, what's this bone called? Now, I get to tell people that we're going to process information, and I usually use short essays or sometimes longer essays, but I avoid multiple guess, multiple choice, or 50-50 true and false questions, or spit up into the blank, fill in the blank things. You see, most of us approach testing in higher education as if it was eating disorder, where people binge the night before and they purge on the exam. They cram and they purge, like we're giving bulimia a good name in higher education. That's not the way people learn or process or retain information. It is the way rote memorization works. It's not the way life works, though. So if you say, hey, Callahan, you're getting off easily because STEM is where the money is, it's where everybody's going today, and you're just teaching all the, French basket weaving courses. Have you ever had to teach for the test, for example? Well, yeah, there is an occasion. I'll tell you a story about it. When I actually had to teach for an accreditation test, an external accreditation test. When I was younger, during my PhD program, I took a 1-year break from my PhD program to go help a small college in Sydney, Australia. Yeah, on the other side of the world, in the other hemisphere, and work with students who were completely different than me. I showed up to class almost every day in a suit and tie. They showed up in swim trunks, t-shirts, and flip-flops. much more casual approach to education, much more friendly, much more interactive. And that is, they weren't as uptight as people in North America were, well, at least in my experience, or at least that I was. Now, what was happening is I was brought there because I had a master's degree already, and they needed, and master's degrees were rare in that field at the time, they needed someone to help them reach accreditation with the National Accrediting Association, an external agency that would qualify them for government funding for their students, for their program. And they needed somebody with the credentials to come in and teach students. Now, students knew that they wanted this accreditation because it validated and they would get reimbursed for the money that they invested in their education. But it also meant that the school could attract more students and get more funding to make their future possible. I was brought in as the heavy hitter to teach for the test. I didn't know anybody that had to pass this test. I asked everyone I could at conferences in higher education as I traveled in Australia about this test and what would be expected. We were given the textbooks, we were given a sample syllabus, and we were told, go for it. I ended up teaching 4 courses, and all 4 counted towards the 5 courses they needed to show a proficiency in their students, in their grading in this external test, or they would not get their accreditation. Now, it was successful. Why? Well, I learned from the students that it took a coaching process rather than just I know you're an empty vessel, I'm going to just spew out things and pour them into that empty vessel and you'll just regurgitate them on the test. I had to figure out how they were able to learn and retain and what motivated them and what importance this was to them. It became much more of an interactive and coaching experience where we would, as I do with tests today, where I break down a question and I say, this is going to probably be on the exam. Let's talk about how they can ask us questions about this and how we can successfully answer the questions. It was one of the most formative experiences in my educational background. And unless I had gone through that learning process in a completely different country, in a different student culture, with the unknown of trying to teach for a test that I had no vision of, no visibility on, I wouldn't be the person I am as a teacher today. You can find those experiences by being a coach in the classroom and see if you can develop into a better teacher, one who's more successful, one who doesn't get fired, one who actually has students that like to take their course and respect you as a teacher. This means that I give more A's and B's and C and D's as I teach, and in 20 years I've never had to fail a student. Why? Because I was in front of it rather than behind it. I was engaging and interactive in the first weeks rather than just the day before a final or the day after when they fail a final or fail to show up for a final. I know it happens. They get scared and they say, I've lost. If you get to that point, then you failed your students just as much as they have failed your course. And if you just enact a couple of these practices, I'm confident that you will become more successful as a teacher at the thing you want to do. Teach successfully, engaging students where they're actually learning, where they actually use what it is you're teaching as they live their lives. And thanks for being part of the Do-Over Show. Please, could you tap the like button because it really helps. And while you're down there, consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. I'm so glad you found me and I found you. Thanks.